welcome to everyone. During these crazy times, I want to certainly find ways to keep folks engaged and continue to hear from experts in the field and to know what's going on out in industry, both to keep sharp on the technology, but also to prepare for opportunities that lie ahead as well. And in thinking through, the topics, one of them was virtualization. And I remember Hunter Evans, who's our speaker today, he and I were sitting in Indianapolis last spring talking about some of the work that he was doing with Microsoft, and I'll let him share a little bit about what he is, quickly his career path through Microsoft. But the work that he was doing and spending a week doing that Microsoft was developing the opportunity to make it a button. And virtualization and automation is such an important piece that this is certainly a timely topic and one that I think will be of interest to the group. So that is our topic today is virtualization and specifically the hypervisor. And Hunter will start off with a little bit of an overview of hypervisor, but then turn to a demonstration of it. There is a file that has been posted in the group chat that you can follow along with it. And also for those TSM students, there's a link in Canvas that is not working this second. So I'll work on that and try to make that work as well. So if you don't have the file in front of you right now, at least you can get it later because he'll refer to several links. But with that, Hunter, thank you for taking the time today to share with us, and I'll let you take it away. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. So I'm going to share out my screen again. Let's make sure we can see it, and then I'll get started.
All right, I got it.
All right, so thank you guys for having me. My name's Hunter Evans, as Michael said. I'm a senior account technology strategist for Microsoft. I now work on the sales side, and what I do is I'm like a walking CTO. So I go into my customers, we talk strategy, we talk mission, we talk, what their overall success goals look like, and then I develop how Microsoft can help them achieve those goals and where the path will take us, how they use our software, our services, our products, and enable them to do more and achieve more in their business around the world. So it's a very, very busy time for me right now. I've never been busier working from home now that half the world or 2/3 of the world has gone remote. Everybody wants to do collaboration and remote work, and that is everything I've been focused on. And one of the key topics here is virtualization. And so Michael reached out to me and asked me if I would present on virtualization. And so I came up with this session, and I called it Winception because we're going to be looking at Hyper-V on Windows 10. And that is going to enable us to do a bunch of virtual Windows instances inside of Windows 10. That's where I came up with the name. I thought it was kind of geeky, kind of cool. And with that, we'll get started. I will say, Michael, I don't know how Zoom handles questions or pop-outs or things like that. So if something does pop up or I need to address something, can you just come off mute and let me know? Otherwise, I'm just talking.
That works.
All right. So I put out this PDF here. I've got it in a Word document, but this is just a quick and dirty sheet that I built up last night to kind of walk us through what we're going through today. The number one thing that I'll say about 1,000 times is that if you need information on Microsoft products, the new location is docs.microsoft.com. That's the best way to search. That's the best way to find things. That's you'll see as we go through this, everything is basically docs.microsoft, docs.microsoft. And as we get down here and configure stuff, docs.microsoft. So that's all of our technical information. If you're stuck in a lab or you want to know product information, hit up docs.microsoft.com. That is our repository. That's what we're going through, and that's where we'll be at most of the day today. I'm going to be moving stuff in and out of monitors. So if it gets hard to follow along, just let me know. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the built-in hypervisor on Windows 10 called Hyper-V. And this lets us run virtual instances of machines locally on our system. There are a couple requirements you have to go through. You got to make sure that you have a Windows 10 Pro Education or Enterprise license. As you can see here, it's not supported on Windows 10 Home. You've also got to make sure that your hardware is up to specs. So, you know, you got to have a 64-bit processor. The later generation Intel processors and AMDs, they do support this. At least 4 gigs of memory, because the virtual machines do share resources with your local machine. There are scripts down here that you can run to check. You can just copy this to check to see if your machine is Hyper-V capable. And once you run that, then you're going to need to turn Hyper-V on. So to turn Hyper-V on, we're going to go to our feature set and turn features on and off. And you'll see this little checkbox here for Hyper-V. And so that is how we turn on the Hyper-V platform. You'll have to do a reboot and everything. But once you get Hyper-V turned on and going, I'm not using my cheat sheet over here, you'll be able to start launching and use the platform. So here's just some more links and things about how you can turn this on if you wanted to do it through PowerShell or if you wanted to do it through command line, things like that. This is all in that PDF file as well. So once you get Hyper-V loaded on your machine and you get it turned on, you get what's called the Hyper-V Manager. And that's this little button here. And it pops up in your Windows administration tools. It's our Hyper-V Manager. And our Hyper-V Manager is actually connecting to your local system. So you'll see that I'm connected to my desktop here. If you run a multiple instance, say you're building a small lab and you want to have 3 laptops, 3 pretty beefy laptops, and you run Hyper-V on each one of these instances, you can actually use Hyper-V Manager to connect out to another system. And so you can run from one single system, multiple Hyper-V instances, reaching over to those other physical devices and connecting to the virtual machines that are on those. So that's one of the neat features about Hyper-V Manager that came out of Windows 10 that was in server. So any questions about how to get Hyper-V installed, or if not, we're going to keep rolling through the demo. All right, I'm taking silence is golden. So once Hyper-V
is one question. Yeah, this is John Voss. I know you're a Microsoft guy, but once you do turn on Hyper-V, then you nullify any other virtualization products such as VMware, Workstation, or something like that can't coexist really with Hyper-V running on a Windows 10 machine. Usually that would cause a major conflict, and you have to make a choice, I believe, of one or the other, but not both. Is that correct?
Honestly, I don't know. I try to avoid the competitors and these kind of things. I try to just show what's native to Windows and what our solutions are. But normally, you would not run a Hyper-V server and a virtual desktop like VMware or Citrix or something like that on the same machine. You'd pick one platform or the other. Is that?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, because normally if you turn on Hyper-V, correct, your Windows 10 OS is now really running in a virtualization session already, and you can't nest them with another hypervisor type product, obviously.
Right.
That just doesn't work. So you do have to make that choice at that point, which one you're going to run.
Right, and you are able to nest VMs inside Hyper-V. There's nesting. It's one of the features that we'll talk about, where you can actually have a VM inside of a VM, if that's something you want to do. But everything I'm talking about today is native to Windows. We're not using any third-party products or anything like that. Everything is free to use if you have the right license. And I talked to Michael. I believe that the Education Edition and the Pro Edition, you guys still have access to through the faculty portal or the subscription that Murray State has to Microsoft for the students to get in there and really play and demo some of this stuff. I think the WKCDC has something similar.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. So now that we are in Hyper-V Manager, we can do a couple different things. So we can set our global properties by looking at our Hyper-V settings. So we can choose where we want to store our virtual hard disks, where we want to store the machines, if we want to do any kind of migrations, if we're allowing enhanced session, which lets us use our clipboard and a couple other features. How we release the mouse, where we get things, et cetera, et cetera. And then we get into what I'm going to jump to is called the Virtual Switch Manager. And Hyper-V lets you create 3 different types of virtual switches. So you have an external network, which will actually bind to your network adapter. So whether you have a wireless card or just a LAN card or anything like that, it will bind the virtual switch that you're creating to use and share that same resource unless you tell it that you do not want the management operating system to share this adapter. So if you want your host machine to only use Wi-Fi and you want all your VMs to go out over a physical NIC, then you can select this setting, you can manage it and change it. An internal network, click here, that lets us share resources between the virtual machines and the host machine. So we can send and connect to resources over a network adapter that is shared between the 2 systems. And then the final one, which is what I'm going to be demoing today, is a private network. And this is completely virtualized and contained. The host machine cannot access this unless you make changes through the management console, but the VMs are on their own separate network. They don't reach out to the internet. They don't reach out to resources through the network adapter that the host machine is using. This is all virtualized and self-contained. So we set that up in the Virtual Switch Manager. Then we can look at how we would create a hard disk. So all of our virtual machines need a hard drive. So there's 3 different formats that we can use, a VHD, VHDX, and a VHD set. Typically, most modern machines are going to use a VHDX for everything that you're going to need because they go up to 64 terabytes. And I'll show you how to create one of these real quick. The differencing disk is something that is really neat to get into. I didn't have enough time to demo that today, but if you're wanting to create something similar to what used to be known as the golden image, where you have a machine configured and it's in a known state out of the box, you can use a differencing disk to create a Windows installation or a Linux installation, and then make changes every time you create a machine, but that differencing disk stays in that known format. A dynamically expanding disk just increases in size as the more that you used, and a fixed size disk is exactly what it says. It doesn't change in size. So what I like to do when I'm moving data in and between VMs, instead of having to worry about the clipboard or things like that, I just use, we'll call this my virtual USB. And we're going to throw this onto my virtual machine store. And we'll make this a 5 gig USB. And so when I say finish here, you're going to see that it's actually going to create and partition off, or not partition, but create a small virtual hard drive for me to use out in my virtual machine directory. So let me browse there, and I'll bring this over. So what you have here is the virtual hard disk file. When you mount it for the first time, you're going to see that there's no partition here. It's not recognized. There's nothing we can do. And what we actually have to do is go to our disk manager. And you'll see that it recognized that there's a new disk here. We'll tell it OK. Here is my little 5 gig drive. We have to format it. Let it use it, and we'll call this our virtual USB. And now you'll see I have a virtual hard drive that I can create and add to and move things around within my system. So I showed you that to show you that now I can come here and eject, and I'm going to come to my demo Win10 VM. Sorry, everything's pulling up on different screens. And so before we're going to get into how to create a VM and look at this, but I want to show you that I can actually come in here, add a hard drive, and I can browse for the disk that I just created. I can mount it, log in here. Let's see, it should go. There we go. And you'll see my virtual USB has moved over with me, and it's got my text document that I came and put in here. So just a neat way that you can move files in and around using your local resources, how you can create them on your host machine and move them in between VMs. So that is our virtual disk demo. The next thing I want to show you is 2 different ways to make virtual machines that are documented and very easy. You can use the quick create if you want to, but I like going through the wizard. So what we're going to do is go through the virtual machine creation wizard here. This is going to be our MSU Win10 demo machine. We're actually storing by default in those global settings I showed you. This is where Hyper-V wants to store everything. I store everything on my storage drive. And we're going to throw it here. So you have 2 different generations of virtual machines built into Hyper-V. So Gen 1 is typically your older ones. There's a 32-bit operating system and has a lot more restricted features. The Generation 2 is typically what you'll choose probably 75% of the time or more, unless you have a really specific scenario. But this allows for our 64-bit operating system that has UEFI-based BIOS. And so we're going to pick Gen 2. Dynamic memory for virtual machines is great if you're not doing a live demo, because it'll spin down the resources that you're not using. But since we're doing this live, we don't want to be throttled at all. So we're going to just give it 2 gigs of RAM. We're going to throw it on our private network that we showed earlier. It's going to create a virtual hard disk for us to use. We're going to drop that down to 60 gig. And here's where we get to choose if we want to install an operating system now or later. And so if we want to install it now, we have 2 options. We can do it from an ISO, which is how we'll be doing things today. But if you have a Pixie server or a network installation server, you can also use the network stack here to Pixie boot off and deploy images to your systems. So here we're going to fire in the Windows 10 1903 ISO. And this is our summary page. So what we're going to be doing is building a Windows 10 VM. It's a Generation 2 virtual machine. It's got 2 gigs of memory. It's on the demo network. Our hard drive that we're creating is here. And it's a dynamically expanding disk. And we're going to be installing this operating system from the ISO file I selected. So I hit finish. I let the wizard do its thing. Next thing we're going to do is look at the settings for the individual virtual machine. So here I can add things like more DVD drives, another NIC, fiber channels. I can choose how I want this machine to boot up. I can choose the security that the machine is going to have, whether I want to allow secure boot, whether I want to put a virtual TPM on it, if I want to shield the VM from my host, do lots of different things. I can change the memory, or I can set it to dynamic memory here. Again, that will throttle your resources that are not being used. I set how many processors I want to give this thing. I'm going to give this 2, just so it deploys pretty quickly. And then I have my hard drive that I'm deploying here, the image that I'm booting from, and then there's all different services here if you want to check and add things that are outside of just the default. One of the things that a lot of these machines will do is called checkpoints, which I've got pulled up over here. Sorry. And a checkpoint is just like a frozen instance in time when you want to revert your virtual machine back to a previous state. So you'll see you come down here, you tell it to enable checkpoints, you set the frequency you want it, or you can manually create checkpoints. And say you get hit with a malware because you're browsing a risky site, or you're doing something you're not supposed to be, and you mess up a setting, you can revert your machine back in time to that safe state so that it's not messed up. But that's just an example of checkpoints. So all of our settings, now we're going to connect to the virtual machine, and you'll see it. We're going to fire it up, and we're going to press the any key. So press the any key, and this is just a typical Windows build. So you see we're already at the Windows screen. We're going to install Windows 10. We hit install now. It's going to run in the background. While this is running, I'm going to show you another way to build VMs. So my next method is going to import a virtual machine. And to import a virtual machine, we have to have either an exported virtual machine or a downloaded virtual machine. So I put in some links. Let's see where we're at in the document. So in the document right here that you guys have, so we've looked at Hyper-V, we've checked our requirements. Now we're here. We're downloading a dev machine, and we're creating our own. So this link here is actually our virtual machine for our dev environment. So Microsoft put together, realized that a lot of people want to try Windows 10. They want to try the developer toolkits. They want to see what's out there, how to use them. And they put together this pre-built virtual machine with Visual Studio, the Windows 10 SDK, and a couple other of the developer tools on there so that you can download and import it directly into your environment and play with it. We do support the links for VMware, Hyper-V, VirtualBox, and Parallels. I downloaded the Hyper-V one last night, and that's what we'll be importing in the demo today. So we're going to select the dev download folder that I got yesterday. You'll see that this is a virtual machine, the date that it was created on. It was created on March 16th. We're importing it. You can either register it in place so that it uses the unique ID that it was exported with. You can restore the virtual machine, or you can copy it. So we're going to create a copy because we want our own ID. We're storing the virtual machine in a different location. And then we're going to browse again, and we're going to throw it back on our virtual machine drive. And there's our summary of what we're going to do. So we're importing a virtual machine. We hit finish. While that's running, we're going to pull up our machine that was deploying. We'll see we get the activate Windows screen. For this, we're just doing demos, so we're going to skip the product key for this. And it's going to ask us what version we want to install. We're going to install Windows 10 Pro. We hit next, next. We're going to do a custom install. Let Windows create the partitions it needs. And tell it to fire off. So that one's running in the background, installing. This one's importing. The finished product here looks like this. And it'll be done by the time we get through the demo. And here is our dev machine. Here is all of our Visual Studios, our developer toolkit, and everything, you'll see that it's on Enterprise Edition, and my Windows license is valid for the next 68 days. So any questions on how to build a virtual machine, build a virtual hard disk, how to, the two different ways I showed, how to deploy or import, or any general questions before I show the lab that I built off? And you'll see that this guy.
Anybody, any of the students that may have a question, you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question. Hunter's not a scary guy.
No, I'm very easygoing.
I did like the, I'll call it a humble brag, that you downloaded a 20 gig file last night.
Oh yeah, it took about an hour and a half. I was surprised, but I'm sure that's just, we're getting throttled somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, these guys are still
well. So, I mean, obviously, I know I could list a bunch of use cases for doing virtual machines on a server or a desktop, but what are you all seeing right now as the most popular use cases for doing virtualization?
Number one use case for virtualization is I want to have a work machine on my home PC. So I want to use my own device. I don't want to have another laptop. I don't want to have another desktop. I work from home part-time. I don't want to make a big investment cost. So how do I do this? A lot of people in the IT industry are gamers, which means they have a pretty beefy machine at home. And with that, they can throw on one of these virtual machines and join it to a work or school account. And I can actually do that and show you how Microsoft does it. And you join it straight to your domain, and then you have a virtualized version of your work machine that shares physical resources with your home PC, but doesn't, you're not putting your monitoring tools or any of your work data that might be confidential onto your system. It's all contained inside the VM. So,
do they usually have to upgrade to Pro to do that? Is that just because, like you said, a lot of home computers run Windows Home? Is it pretty easy to upgrade to Pro?
It is, and it's fairly inexpensive. I don't have the price cost, on the top of my head, but I want to say that the difference in licensing is under $50 or around $50.
Okay.
And a lot of times, if you're buying a business class machine, or if you're doing a pre-built machine that's pretty beefy, you can do like if you go through Dell or something like that, you can do the upgrade to Pro for a lot of times it's free if they're running a promotion or something like that.
Okay, cool.
What about the push to move that to Microsoft's Azure deployment instead of running it locally? You find a lot of customers are moving that direction.
Absolutely.
Put virtual machines out to a cloud-based interface and not need to have the resources locally to run that?
Yes. Yep. So that is the Windows Virtual Desktop that runs inside of Azure. Let me pull that over. So this is where we have a business class customer that wants to enable remote workers. Their people have machines at home, but say they're not beefy enough to run, and they're not going to make the investment to put them a laptop or put them a desktop at their house. They can spin up in their Azure tenant the Windows Virtual Desktop, which puts them a Windows 10 PC on their corp network, pre-configured and with all their security tools and everything, just native to the Azure cloud. So this is probably the more business-oriented, non-developer role, where I wouldn't want to, I want to enable, Sam in accounting, or Bob in engineering, or I want to have him a PC, but I don't want him taking resources home, but I need him to connect in. This is something that's very similar to like the Citrix desktop, where you would download the Citrix client and connect in through there. But This one's built and baked in on Azure. It runs on our cloud. I didn't put that link in there, but that's something we're interested in. I can throw that in later. So I did want to show you that this machine is done importing. And so we'll fire it up. And let's see where our build machine is going. So we're done building. Windows has installed. What we're getting ready to see is called the UBI, which is the out-of-box experience. So you'll see this as when you download or install Windows for the first time. First time you sign in, Cortana will talk to you. All that fun stuff.
So how useful would this Hyper-V be for like testing something before you deploy it? Like say you're working with like a Windows kiosk and you're trying to get that to work. Would this be useful for like testing and configuring that before you actually deploy it out?
Absolutely. And the number one reason that this is so useful for that scenario is because you can have admin rights. You know, I control everything in these VMs. I am the admin for them. I can move hard drives in and out. I control how many procs they get. I can virtualize and simulate all my scenarios in the field for what I expect. And I don't have to go get permission to do this. This is built natively into my machine. And if I want to be the administrator in here, or I want to create 3 more accounts, or I want to do, X, Y, Z, whatever it is, I can go in here. I can enable this account. I can add myself to the administrator group. Right now, this is the dev machine, so the only user that has is users. You'll see that there. But if I want to create a new user, if I want to run a process, if I want to change the registry, anything I want to do, it's all containerized. Like I said, if you do the snapshotting features or look at something like a differencing disk where you want to test different deployment methods, then you have full control over everything that's running. And I'm going to mute Cortana so she doesn't talk back to us.
Would you be able to import an image file that was taken through like a non-Microsoft method? Or like if you have like an idea of what your deployment is going to look like and you have an image file, could you import that into Hyper-V?
Yes.
Okay. Because in my experience, I've used a lot of Ghostcast specifically. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Ghostcast, but it's probably very similar. So here we go. Now we've got the out-of-box experience going. So we're going to let that run. And then the dev machine's there. So the next couple things I wanted to show is I've got my own little virtualized Active Directory forest here. And so this is a server 2019 running on Windows 10. It is a domain controller. And we can pop out our, let's see. The domain I built is called demo.it. You'll see the different computers that have joined. So we have a demo server that has a graphical interface, a demo server that does not have a graphical interface, which we call headless. A Windows 10 PC with Admin Center and a Windows 10 development machine that I can control. I can move them around. I can add, create users, test anything I want to in my domain. So my demo server here.
About how beefy does your computer have to be to run all this? Like, this is like several operating systems. What are your specs, I guess you'd say?
So, mine's pretty decent. I got 32 gigs of RAM. I got a 6-core processor. I have 4 SSDs and then a GTX 1080. But
wow,
if you're, I mean, you can run this with something that has like 12 gigs of RAM. If you're going to run 2 or 3 VMs, you can run it with 8 and have a very small VM.
Okay.
I have, my wife cleaned my office, so I don't know where it went, but I have a little Surface Pro, and I run VMs on that thing. My work machine over here, well, my background's on, it's not going to show. My work machine from Microsoft is a Surface Book. It's got 16 gigs of RAM.
Okay.
I run 2 VMs on that pretty much all the time for customer demos and showing them things. I mean, you'll see that these are very small. They've only got 2 gigs of RAM.
Yeah.
And they still run, you know, fairly quickly. This is not something you want to try to run an enterprise on. But if you're just trying to, you know, do some development work, or if you're just trying to play around and get familiar with the settings, this is a great place to start. If you're going to take any certifications, whether it be, you know, A+, Server Plus, any Microsoft certification, Cisco, anything like that, and you need a development environment where you can play around, tear it up, you know, mess it up, and you know, revert back, this is what this excels at exceptionally.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. So this is our server, and you'll notice our server has 1 app on it, Notepad++. That's for the demo that's coming up. And then I want to show you the server that is headless. And the pop-up we got a minute ago was our MSU machine. It's done. So it's fully deployed. It's ready to go. We'll join it to the domain in just a second. But you'll see our Windows 10 machine. It's done. It's ready. So here is our headless machine. So there is no graphical user interface on this. This is command line only. I'm not going to sign in or play around with this one, but I just want to show you that you can virtualize if you just want servers running. Like if you want to build a web server on here and you just want to manage it and not have a lot of overhead, that's something else you can do. You also, it does support a lot of Linux OSs. So here is a Ubuntu build that I had, and it is full Ubuntu. I can ping because my IP address is set. This is not joined to my domain, but I can reach out and ping other machines on my network. So again, everything is self-contained. It's not sharing any resources with my network adapter on my machine that I'm presenting to you guys on. This is all self-contained inside my machine. So that's my Ubuntu build. Then, so let's go here and we'll show you, where's our MSU? So by default, you're going to see that when you build a machine, it gets a weird name. So we get this desktop and random characters. That's fine for the demo. You'll also see that because I don't have a DHCP server running, the first thing I get is an APIPA address. So we're going to go change that. And we're going to set a static IP for this machine. And there's other ways to do this. This is just the fastest way for me. Here's my cheat sheet here. .50. And I'm putting in the IP of my domain controller for my DNS server. And your fun fact of the day is that all Active Directory problems are DNS problems and proven otherwise. I'm not sure why that's showing. It's not there because I did fix it. Interesting. So it didn't save. But it's IPv6. 1 second. Turn IPv6 off. And we'll just reboot to be safe. So we'll reboot that guy. While this guy's rebooting, there are a couple other built-in virtualizers on Windows that use the Hyper-V platform that I wanted to show you guys. So one of the cool new features that was announced, I don't remember which conference it was announced at, but was called Windows Sandboxing. So Sandbox runs completely isolated from your host machine. It is a full installation of Windows 10. It wipes everything out when it's closed. So if you need to try to detonate a file or do some risky browsing because somebody sent you a link that you're not sure of or things like that, you can do Windows Sandboxing. It's turned on the same way that Hyper-V is. So we go down here to our turn Windows features on and off. We scroll down to Windows Sandbox. We turn Windows Sandboxing on. And what that looks like is this little icon right here. We turn on Windows Sandbox. It takes a few seconds. And now I have a full Windows 10 instance ready to go that doesn't have any of my connectivity back to my home machine. I can search the web. I can go to Murray State. I can click links that Michael Ramage sends me that I don't trust. You know, all the fun stuff that you would want to do. And when I'm done with this, I hit the X and it says, hey, are you sure you want to close? Because once it's closed, everything you did in this sandbox instance is going to be gone. And I tell it yes, and it wipes everything away. So really neat feature, great for if you have something that you don't need to keep around for more than 10 minutes. You don't have to go through all the build out of the Hyper-V server or building the network or things like that. You just click the button, it fires up, and then you're good to go. So let's see if my server's done rebooting. It looks like it is. I don't know why it's still not coming back. This is why demos live are always fun. Yeah, we're set right. So let's see if it's just a graphical error. Doesn't look like it, but we're going to go ahead and try to join the domain. If it doesn't work, I'll try the other machine. Nope. All right, so this one broke. I'm not sure why it's broke. But it is broke. The last thing I'll do is try giving it a different IP address. For some reason, .50 has been acting up. Let's give it .82. Not sure why, but it doesn't like .50. Demo.it. Demo admin, my super secure password. And you'll see I'm now on the domain. Restart this machine. And I showed you that to show you the last feature of my demo. New feature to Microsoft that just came out not too long ago. Let me find the link. It's over here. Is the new Windows Admin Center. So Windows Admin Center can be installed on either Windows Server or Windows 10. It runs as through a web browser, and it lets you connect out to all the machines that it can reach using WinRM. It's a neat little feature. I got to play with it for the first time last night, and we're going to fire it up here. I believe it's this guy. Yep, here's my Windows Admin Center. And so because this machine is part of the domain, I can actually manage all of my resources, all my machines from this little web app. So you'll see I've already pulled in my demo DC. It gives you some performance data, some real neat things to look at. You can see the utilization, what memory it's using as it's trafficking over the network. I can look at any apps that are installed. This all syncs with Azure too, so it's really neat, pretty impressive. You'll see that when I go to local users and groups, because this is a domain controller, it can't pull that. I can look at my, let's see, where are my logs? So my events here. I can go look at my security log right from this app. And again, this is running a little slow because everything, I've got about 8 virtual machines running on my machine right now. But you will see that it has populated, almost 14,000 items in the security log that it would report on. But I'm not going to wait for it. I'm going to jump back. So to add new machines, we're going to tell it to go find Windows 10 PCs. We're going to search inside of Active Directory. We're going to give it a wildcard just to go find anything that's out there. You'll see it's reaching out. Again, everything is contained in this one little network, so it's reaching out of WinRM. And you'll see that it found not only the 2 PCs that it doesn't have the agent running on, but it also found the Windows 10 PC that we built. So we'll go ahead and add all of them to our collection. We will reach out to this server that had a GUI on it because I wanted to show you that it does pick up apps that get installed. If you remember, we had Notepad++ installed on that server. It recognizes that the apps are installed there. And then again, I can see all of my performance data here about this. So that's the Windows 10 Admin Center. The last thing I have to demo is related to Linux. So I saved it for last. You'll notice I have a little Ubuntu button down here. Linux is now built into the Windows Store. So if I go to, or I guess it's the Microsoft Store now. If I go to the Microsoft Store and I just search Linux, you'll see that I can get Ubuntu, I can get Kali Linux, a couple different other versions. This is something that is pretty new. It's on that sheet I was showing you. So if you want to run your own little version of Linux inside of Windows 10, you turn on the Windows subsystem using PowerShell, or you can do the turn features on that I've demoed a couple times. And then once you get it, you have your own little version of Ubuntu. I've got my cheat codes over here. And we are going to look up the help pages for root. You'll see here's all my root help pages. Let's see. Or if I want to update this version of Linux that's running, I enter my password, and it actually goes out and starts fetching all the update packages. So that's everything I have for demo. I'm hoping we got some questions left because I went through a whole bunch of stuff. And I guess I'll turn it back over to Michael and the group.
I think Jesse has a question.
Yeah. Do you have to have Pro to do the Linux, like download the Kali or the Ubuntu? Or is that just like an overall, you can just add that?
I don't think it's restricted to a certain license because it's in the store. I believe it's available. I think the only one it probably wouldn't work in is Windows 10S, which I don't think there's many people in the world that have Windows 10S right now. But I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. I'll try it.
It looks like it does. According to the documents, you do have to have fall creators update. So
Okay.
you have build 16, 2.15 or later.
All right.
But
You can totally grab Kali with a home edition of Windows because I just did it.
Oh, okay.
here you go.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. If you want to play with this some more, I did put this link in the the PDF, which is the step-by-step guide to deploy Windows 10. So it lets you build a DC, build a server, build a PC. It shows you how to use some of our deployment tools, but it goes through step-by-step an entire lab, and it'll take you a couple hours. But it is neat because it helps you get used to the virtualization technologies. It helps you get used to Windows 10, how to deploy it. We really help, kind of build some of those foundational skills that you would need when transitioning into the workforce. So what else do we got out there?
I might have an additional question for you, Hunter. Recently, Microsoft announced, I think, some major shift or changes in their certification paths starting this summer, possibly doing away with a lot of the old traditional certification paths, like your MC, SE, and so on, and primarily moving industry certifications to an Azure platform only. What's your opinion about that? Have you seen people being upset over that?
So I went in February to our technical conference in Seattle and actually met, I can't think of her title now because it was so amazing. But she is actually our learning professional and does all the psychology around why the certifications are the way they are. She has a great story about why the shift is happening. What I've seen personally is it's just really a title change from the MCSA to MCSE because you have the learning path. So if I look up, let's see, yeah, oh, let me share my screen again, sorry. So we have to take certifications every year at Microsoft. If I look at the exams and about exams here on Microsoft.com. So first and foremost, Azure is where our future is. So that's where the most investment's going. Cloud first is our mission. And that is where everybody is being pushed from our leadership to make sure that we are experts in our field, we're experts on our platform. So when we look at the Azure exams, you'll see, and I'm not sure why they're done this way, but the 900 exam is the fundamentals exam. So I had to take Azure Fundamentals, I had to take Dynamic Fundamentals. There is I believe it's Modern Desktop Fundamentals. Let's see if I just search 900. Let's take out Azure. Yeah. So Azure Fundamentals, you'll see Power Platform Fundamentals, Dynamics, M365 Fundamentals. So the fundamental exam, which used to be equivalent to about a MCSA level, which was your kind of associate level exam, that is where they're hitting as far as from my personal experience. When you get to more of the 100 to 300 level, so I think AZ 103, yeah, so AZ 103 is your Azure administrator. That's going to be that in between probably MCSA to MCSE level, and then your 300 level plus, yeah, so your certified solutions architect. This is going to be your, what would be the MCSE, the Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert, I think is what it stood for back in the day. But they are, the exams are they're changing. If you haven't ever taken a Microsoft exam, I would recommend you watching, some videos on them and listening and reading about them. The exams are changing to where they have live labs in the exam. So it's no longer a brain dump where somebody can go out there, memorize all the exam questions, and then sell you a brain dump. There are situational based questions where it'll ask you what is the best answer, and 3 of the 4 or even 4 of the 4 answers might be right, but you have to know the licensing, the scenario, the usage, the cost, all of those take place into the exam now, so that, again, it's not just I'm doing a brain dump, I passed the exam, now how do I actually use the product or the platform? I have no idea, because all I did was study the brain dump. The exams are changing to be more interactive, and you show that you know how to use the platform and work the platform. Does that help? I know I talked a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Fire away.
For Hunter, the Windows Server Hyper-V, what would be the difference in running that versus running just a Windows Server and putting the Hyper-V onto it through the features?
You're talking about running Windows Server Hyper-V for like data center hosting, or just running like Windows Server and then going in and turning on the features? Am I understanding correct?
Or like running VMs, like a ESXi, like VMware ESXi is like it's a server that would host a bunch of virtual machines instead of running them locally on your.
Right. So if I remember VMware ESXi, it's a very small host platform, but then all the resources get consumed by the VMs, right? And it's what controls and manages the VMs, which is what Hyper-V does.
Yes.
Hyper-V just is a feature of Windows Server. So you do have to have a server baseline. As far as I know, they could have changed it to where it's kind of baseless now. But as far as I know, you do have to install Hyper-V. That way you can host the VMs on the server.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because on Azure, they actually have a Windows 2016 Hyper-V installation. And I just wondered why you would use that instead of actually just installing Windows Server and then enabling the Hyper-V features.
I'm not sure on the details on that, especially with it being in Azure. I would just, unless it's something branding saying that it's a VM that runs on Hyper-V, I'm not sure. I have to go look that up. But with Azure especially, I mean, you should just be able to run whatever server you want, whether it's Linux or Windows based.
I presume if you're going to run Hyper-V on a server, you'd want that server to run headless without a bunch of GUI and just manage it through your workstation's feature set or tool set.
That's 100% personal preference. I came from an organization where most of the admins were 60 plus years in age, so they absolutely wanted a GUI. They did not want to learn PowerShell. They did not want to do any kind of remoting. They had the old school mentality of I want to touch it, I want to feel it, I want to be able to manage it and see it. A lot of our newer generation workers just want it to work. So smallest footprint they can put on there, and like I was showing here, I mean, from my Windows 10 PC, I could connect directly to that server that is headless and manage all the VMs on it that way. So there is a debate if it adds any more security, because it isn't. Doesn't have a graphical interface on it, but when it comes to like the nation state actors or these large scale attacking groups, having a graphical interface or not is not going to stop them. So.
Well, let me stop us there. It's 12 o'clock. You have been going a full hour, so thank you for that. And I'll say that you shared a ton of information. I think we all were able to get something valuable out of it. So thank you, Hunter, very much. Actually, Randall just shared a comment. This is in the neighborhood of what 443 is moving towards is some of what we're discussing. We're working on. But for those that don't know, I should have shared this at the very beginning. Hunter is a Murray State TSM graduate, both at the undergrad level and the graduate level. And he is finishing up his MBA right now as well. So for those that ever ask about learning, Hunter hasn't stopped since he graduated, whether it's a degree, another degree, or a certification. Hunter is one that is always learning. And I think that's very important, no matter what degree you finish with and no matter what education goals you have, is that in this area, in this field, you always have to be willing to continue learning. So thank you, Hunter, very much. And as we end today and start looking forward to next week, I just want to go ahead and share, you'll be getting an email about this as well. But next week, Jacob Nance, who is also a Murray State TSM graduate as well, will be sharing at the same time next week. He has been in DevOps for most of his career. He started out at Cat Finance, went over to Lifeway bookstores, and is currently at Vanderbilt Institute of Clinical and Translational Research doing DevOps. And that's a topic that several have asked about or wanted to learn more about. So we'll have Jacob sharing with us next week at 11 o'clock. So it's April 15th at 11. Jake will be sharing a little bit about DevOps. So I hope that you're able to join in next week at 11 as well. But with that, thank you very much for your time and your attention today. If you have questions or if you have follow-ups for Hunter, let me know. I'm happy to get you in touch with Hunter. Hunter would be happy to respond to, I'm saying that, I'm pretty sure Hunter is willing to respond to a question that you might have. But if you also have a topic or a technology area that you'd like to learn more about and want me to find a guest speaker, let me know that as well. I'm happy to do that. During this strange time that we're in, I want to make sure that we have as many opportunities for you as possible. So please don't hesitate to give me any feedback or thoughts that you have. And with that, I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much for attending.